Hey guys, this week on the DogBone podcast, we are actually partnering up with a buddy of mine, Bob Owens, and Lone Duck's Gun Dog Chronicles. Several months back, Bob was gracious enough to have me on as a guest, and I really enjoyed the conversation. We had a really good talk. Again, when I record podcasts with buddies, it is like a conversation more than a podcast, and I think that comes through and it's real genuine, and I really appreciate him for allowing us to share that audio with you guys. So this next podcast is actually a different podcast, but so check out Lone Duck's Gun Dog Chronicles as well. Lots of really good stuff on there that I think you'll probably enjoy. So enjoy this one. Thank you for your support, and we appreciate it.
Lone Duck's Gun Dog Chronicles. Tonight's episode, we talk about everything shed dog hunting. I'm so excited to be here with Kevin and our guest Jeremy Moore from DogBoneHunter.com. Jeremy has pioneered the shed hunting with your dog industry. He's created some really cool products, and he's going to help us teach our dogs how to shed hunt and give us and our dogs something to do in the off season. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here tonight.
You bet. Hey, first off, fellas, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to it. Obviously, we've messaged back and forth a little bit on it. So, like you said, and a hell of an intro there. I'm going to have to really live up to that. But so like you said, so my name is Jeremy Moore, and I'm from Wisconsin. I'm actually from a small town called Pulaski. It's near Green Bay. No one knows what Pulaski is, but everyone knows Green Bay. So I lived here most of my life. My wife and I, and we have a couple kids, and we've got a baby on the way. So we've got a really, a real typical family. I think we've got a lot of dogs. We own a few and train a few. It ends up being what I think is a lot in relative terms. It's probably not that many from a trainer's standpoint, but for me it is. But so we've got a small company. It's called More Outdoors. It actually has a couple different brands. One of our brands is DogBone. It was one of the ones that really kind of got us started and established us, and gave us. It was a passion of mine that turned into a business. So it's something that's been a real interesting journey, and now we're looking to continue to kind of take it and grow it. And our product started out. I mean, I know we're going to talk a lot about shed training. Our product line started out shed training. We moved into some game recovery training, which is tracking. We kind of went to the idea of I'm a real passionate whitetail hunter. I'm a big. If it weren't for it's funny because just recently, now that the fall has started, with bird hunting, I'd thought about it quite a bit because I'm training some gun dogs right now, and I know I wouldn't bird hunt. I wouldn't do upland, and I wouldn't do waterfowl if it weren't for dogs. Like that's the reason why I do it. I love doing it. And so, but I'm a really passionate whitetail guy, and I had to figure out a way to kind of cross over the things that I loved. I loved deer hunting. I loved everything about deer, but I loved working the dogs. And so one of the things that was kind of unique when we started, it was real early on, and the idea of how do you use your dog, your retriever, to help you from a deer standpoint. And to me, the first thing that I found, the real connection and synergy was shed training. And then from there it evolved into some game recovery work. And I, the dogs I'm training, the dogs I own, they do all of it. They don't just do one or the other. I don't specialize with them. So that's kind of like a real nutshell, to where we are now. But yeah, we're a small company. We're trying to grow it.
That's awesome. So quick little side note from the dogs. Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers? Who's your guy?
Oh man, I'm a Bears fan.
What?
No, that could turn some people off real quickly if they're Packer fans. But I'll tell you what it did. Growing up a Bears fan in literally the shadows of Lambeau Field, like my high school was blocks away from Lambeau Field, it made for thick skin. So I feel like it helped forge me into the man I am today. But if I had to pick, the gunslinger. Like you
That's
can't.
right.
I'm Silver Fox all the way.
All day. I'd rather drink a beer with Brett Favre than Aaron Rodgers. But
Totally. Now I bump into Rodgers once in a while. I see him at the post office, and I will say this: good dude, really, really humble, really grounded, really nice guy. But yeah, if I got to pick, I'm going Favre.
Good deal. Yeah, I would too.
Next time you see him, let him know you think that.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, cool. All right, so now let's get started with the dogs. You know, you kind of touched on it, but tell us about your first dog. What was the dog's name, and how did it come to be where shed hunting and this dog became more than just, you know, a side thing?
Yeah. So so backing up, like I was raised. My parents had golden retrievers. I had golden retrievers all my life growing up. Very informal training. My parents didn't know how to train dogs. I didn't know how to train dogs. I was a kid. But we had a friend of ours, a family friend, that we actually got our first golden retriever from, and he was a big hunter. He was one of my dad's buddies, and he had really, really nice gun dogs. And so both upland and waterfall. And so they were Goldens. And so I kind of I knew what I wanted. I didn't know how to get it. And so when I grew up, my parents had these Goldens. I fooled around with them a little bit, but not very seriously until I went to college. And when I was out of high school, going to college, I brought one of the golden retrievers, one of our family's golden retrievers. I brought her to school with me. And that fall, a couple of my buddies got some dogs, and you go through that phase where before you get kids and wives and stuff, you get dogs. So these guys all got pups in college, and I brought my parents for a semester in the fall, and kind of we hunted the dogs pretty hard, and I loved it. I mean, I knew right then I needed my own. So the following year, I got my own. I got a black lab. It was the first lab our family had ever had. We had these golden. I love Goldens. They have such long hair, and we'd shave them in the fall, and they look like labs. So I thought, why not get a lab? So I got a lab, and man, she was good. And it was probably what really started me on the road that I am on now, because she was just really good. I wasn't, she was, and she made it real easy. And I found a lot of success with her. And so, but it was all bird stuff. I went to school in Western Wisconsin, UW Stout, a little state school. And most of my buddies were from Minnesota, and they were all big duck hunters. So I got into it pretty heavily in college. I trained this little dog. She was a real fine gun dog. And from there, I got out of school, and I hunted a lot through college. And once I got out of school and I started working, I realized real quickly that I missed the deer part, because I spent most of my time bird hunting. And if you're a serious hunter, you realize very quickly that if you're a bird hunter, you don't have time to be a deer hunter. Like if you're a deer hunter, you don't have time to be a bird hunter. Like if you're going to do them seriously, it just takes so much commitment time wise. So I got away from the deer stuff, and then I wanted to get back to it. And so I had this dog of mine who at that time, she must have been 5 or 6 years old at that point. And I took her and had heard about a guy shed hunting with his dog. I Googled it, and at that time it was one article. It was an Outdoor Life article. You can still find it if you Google it, but it was this one guy that it was just a story about him and using his dog, and he was shed hunting with it out west. And so I decided that, man, I'm going to try it. And this is this old dog of mine named Remy, and she did it. I mean, she just did it, but everything she did well. So it wasn't really a surprise to me that she could do it. I didn't know what I was doing, and she was just She was a real intelligent dog and real biddable. Just really wanted to make you happy. Started picking up some antlers with her, and that first year I found more antlers that year than I had found any other year shed hunting prior. And I shed hunted prior to using the dogs. Put a lot of miles on, probably didn't know where I was going, didn't go to the right places for a variety of reasons. I didn't find many. But once you start doing something and finding success, like, it's really easy to figure out, if you look at it and try to break it down, why did you find success in it? And then you just get better at it. So me and her did it for a season, and then I was real hooked. From that point on, I bought a pup. I actually bought a pup that I was gonna. That's all I wanted to do with her, was shed trainer. So I got her, and was bringing her up to be a shed dog. And early on, she was probably about 6 months old. I remember this is like the start of our business. So I remember it like it was yesterday, and I took this dog, and it was in the springtime, and she was probably 6 months old. She was done teething. She was making little retrieves for me, and I pitched an antler for her, just a hard antler. And I figured that's the way to do it. And so I threw it for her. She had a lot of drive, and she had a lot of go, and she had a lot of excitement. And she ran up to that antler, and she poked herself. And she turned around and came running right back to me, just scared. I mean, like, the body language on her was so clear. And she yipped a little bit, and she wanted nothing to do with it, like, immediately. And so I really kicked myself, and I went, boy, did I screw that up, And so I started thinking about it, and I started thinking, well, why, what happened? I'm always trying to analyze stuff and break it down and figure out, like, if it doesn't go well, why, and how do I change it? If it did go well, why, and how do I replicate it? So it's kind of a thought process I'm always thinking about. And I realized, boy, I don't introduce bird dogs. A little 6-month-old dog, I'm not going to put her in a pen with a rooster and hope I turn into a gun dog or a bird dog. It just doesn't work that way. So I thought about it, and I thought, man, how could I incrementally get her comfortable or understanding what this thing is, and that it's not a negative and all that. And it's not to say that it happens all the time, because I don't think it will. I don't think all dogs that hear loud noises turn gun shy. I don't think that happens, but I think that you increase your chances of having those effects if you don't introduce something properly to a dog. And so this was a real similar situation. I just had a dog that was afraid of an antler, and it was because of a negative introduction. So that was when DogBone started, because I was like, damn, dude, I got to figure out a better way of doing this. So I thought about it, and I thought, when I train a gun dog or a bird dog, I take incremental steps. I start out with a balled up sock, and then I go to a puppy bumper, and then I tape some wings to it. I add scent to it. I take steps to get them to birds. And so why aren't I taking steps to get them to sheds? And so that was where the idea came. And so those two dogs I credit the business on, because Remy was the dog that got me passionate about training dogs. And she lived a great life, man. We lost her several years ago, but she was just awesome. And she was one of those really, really special dogs. And I was lucky because it was one of my first ones. And then Finn was the other dog that, helped me by me being dumb and making a mistake. She helped me figure out a better way of doing it, and that kind of grew into what our business is at this point.
That's pretty cool. So how did you overcome the antler shyness? How over time? How did that work out? Explain that.
With Finn, with that dog specifically?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think it was time. Part of it was time. You're gonna hear. I'm sure we'll talk for a while here, and you'll hear me talk about time and how I hate it. How I just, when it comes to training, I don't correlate time often. This is one time that, yes, I had to build in time. It took time. It took me figuring out ways to be creative to build her confidence back up. So. There was time. I mean, I literally, she was a pretty soft dog, and I like soft dogs, probably to the degree of a lot of people would say they're not very good, and I go, oh, that's perfect. I love that one, because I like them softer. It's my personality. It's my training style. I get more out of those dogs. I don't have a real, I'm not real heavy with a dog. I struggle. I'm big on building trust and connection and feel. I'm not big into fear tactics. I don't like dogs working because they're afraid I'm going to get after them. So it's my psychology of how to get the most out of somebody, whether they be people or dogs. So this little dog was soft, and I realized that, and I just went, man, I'm going to have to get creative and figure out ways to build her confidence. It was to the point where, like, I would pick up an Antler, she'd go away from me, like she'd go in the other room. Like she just had this, and I don't know if it got her in the nose, if it got her in the eye, little, 6-month-old pup, pretty small, little sensitive face. Now you couple that with a relatively soft dog, it was probably pretty traumatic for her. And so I really kind of think she thought the thing bit her, like, and it was a sign of, dog's pretty smart. So if you go up to something and stick your face in it and it bites you, don't do it again. Like that,
Yeah.
That's smart. Like, to me, that's a sign of intelligence. And so I think that's part of what she had in the back of her mind. So I had to figure out a way. I had to figure out how to get her to come around to the idea this thing isn't going to hurt me necessarily. So it was a lot of like desensitizing, just having an Antler around in the first place. And then when it was, ensuring that it wasn't startling. Like I wasn't gonna be able to get her past it by trying to force it into her mouth. I wasn't gonna get her past it by dropping it on. I mean, it could have been an accident, but you drop it next to her and there's a loud bang, and oh god, so I had to be real careful about it, and it took time. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm reminded of it regularly with dogs, and probably the older I get and the more I train, the less I care about their age and the time that I've got into doing something. All I care about is getting there. I don't care how long it takes to get there. I care about getting there. So I've really, as a whole, slowed my processes down with everything I do. And for me, sometimes I have to remind myself of that too, and go, I don't know why I'm stressing out or why I'm worrying about it. At times, like if I'm training a client's dog in particular, sometimes they aren't as patient as I am.
Right.
Most of the time, they're not as patient as I am. But I have to realize and sometimes take a step back and go, you know what? I trust my process. I think we're on the right track. As long as we're moving forward, we're good.
No, I couldn't agree more. I feel like I've got the same problem, or maybe not problem is the word, but same idea with my clients for gun dog training. It's not every dog's the same. Not every dog, they might be stellar at one piece of the training, but they're really struggling something else. And I've got to balance to keep the attitude up, positive, fun, and maintain, the progress that we're trying to make to become ultimately a great hunting companion.
Right.
But every dog's different, and I feel stress sometimes of like we're not getting there quick enough.
Yep.
But what is quick enough? Every dog is different. Every dog is different.
No, I totally agree, man. And it's such a relative thing, and it's so it creates one of the issues I see with it is comparisons, like, and you nailed it when you said, sometimes some of these dogs do really, really well at something in particular, but they really struggle at something else. Well, I got news for you. Like, it's a chain. Like, and if all the links aren't connected, the chain doesn't do you any good. So like, you could be very, very good at certain things, but you're not real good at other things, or you're really not good at all at certain things. And unfortunately, they all have to be there in order to connect. And so, and I training the dogs is pretty easy. Sometimes it's, having that, and I think I think the reason is because like that's my mindset. Like, that's how I think. I get that because I've been doing it a long time, where sometimes, other parties that are involved with it, I shouldn't expect them to get it, because it took me a long time to figure it out myself. So I've learned, I think over the years, I've gotten a lot better. I need to continue to get a lot better at being able to verbalize and explain it to people that don't necessarily, it's not clicking with them. It's just not making sense. I talk about it clicking a lot, like with the dog. Like you'll do something, and all of a sudden it clicks, and then we move forward. And so I need to get things to click sometimes with owners, and I see it. I know when it happens.
Right.
It's good. We'll get there. We always do. But I see when it happens, because you read their face, and they're all of a sudden they go, oh, and they get it. And once they get it, I go, there, now they understand. And now, it just becomes a lot easier. So, with me, a lot of clients that I train dogs for, they're clients that I've already trained dogs for. And those are seemingly a little less friction, because it just goes smoother, because they get it. They've heard me say the things I say enough times where they not only do they hear it, but they listen to it, and then they hear it, and you can tell it makes sense to them.
Yeah.
So
well,
that's like,
they understand and trust the process too.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. Cool. And that comes, and understandably, if you come back to someone and you're doing business with someone again, like there's a reason why. It's because you were satisfied, you liked what you got out of it the first time, and like, exactly, trust is such a big word there, and they get it. And so that's, to me, that's something I'm always looking for. As a trainer, that's, I think, what everyone is looking for.
Sure. All right, let's jump. I couldn't agree more. But to jump into, we were talking about the young dog who got poked by the Antler. It led you into innovating and inventing a new product that, as far as I know, has never even been thought of by anybody but yourself, and that would be the shed antler retrieving system. And in essence,
after the money I spent on the patent, no one else better. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. But it essentially, it's a extremely durable bumper that's shaped like an antler. So how did you develop that? What made you think, besides, having the experience you had with your dog, how did you come up with that? And then how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So my idea with it was, I realized my problem. Like, I think everything comes from problems. Like, there's, problems are problems, but boy, you get a lot of good stuff out of them, because it gives you chances to think about things and fix stuff and figure out better ways, more efficient ways, slicker ways to do things. So for me, that's what this was. I had a problem, and I went, how do I avoid it in the future? Because I had this, like, I didn't have, it took me a while to develop it. So, I went and fixed this little dog that was afraid of antlers. It took a long time, and it took a lot of different ways of being creative. I found places that she was really, really comfortable. I slowly introduced the idea of an antler could be around that, and it's not so bad. And so that was her. But then I went, next time I don't want to put myself in this position. So when it came to the idea behind it, I thought, when I train gun dogs, I don't start out with birds. I start out with things, and I make them look like it, and I make them smell like it, and I make them feel like it, and eventually we introduce some birds. And so it was this process, these steps that we took to do it. So I replicated that with an antler, and I went, the thing that I found that was difficult with young dogs, because now as I'm training more and more of them, I'm starting to figure out. I'm starting to go, man, I'm running into some things that are similar, things that they might blink at a little bit, balk at a bit. So one of them was feel. Like, a hard antler in a soft mouthed dog, it just doesn't. It's not built that way. Like, these dogs have been bred for hundreds and hundreds of years to have what we call a soft mouth, deliver birds undamaged. They have, it's genetic, it's DNA, it's been built into them. And so when you start taking objects that are hard, like an antler, and you start putting it to a soft mouth, there's tendencies to be like, hey, this isn't right. This isn't the way. And so I've had some dogs that just don't like the idea of it. So I know what they do like. I know that that soft mouth and a feel of a soft object in their mouth is good. So I started out actually with the original one was a foam material. It was a poured foam material. I got in touch with a manufacturer out of Minnesota and worked with molding. I gave him an antler because I wanted it to be a certain type of antler. Like I didn't want real long tines. I didn't want I wanted to make it so that we could set a dog up for success to pick up this shape. Because what I really believe shed dogs do is they're not in love with sheds. I don't think bird dogs are in love with birds. I don't think a duck dog loves dogs. I think duck dogs love to retrieve. We teach them what to retrieve. I mean, they started out bringing fish out of nets. So it's not like it's just a bird dog. It's not like it's just a shed dog. So what I needed to do was teach, my dogs love to retrieve. Like, when it comes to dogs makeup, retriever is a retriever. Like, it's part of their name. They retrieve naturally. So what I think we need to do is figure out what do we want them to retrieve, and then how do we go about that. So for me, a shed dog is nothing more than a duck dog that has been conditioned to pick up the shape of an antler and eventually the smell of an antler and do the exact same thing that he would do if it was a duck or a pheasant or a quail or a whatever, like my newspaper. I mean, I've seen some really, really nice bird dogs and gun dogs go get beer out of the refrigerator for their owners. Like, those dogs weren't bred to be beer dogs. They're retrievers. And
that's my kind of dog.
Teach them some specific, duties, some jobs that lend themselves well to their natural inherent traits. So my shed dog, my idea was get the shape of an antler. Just make it look like an antler and make it feel good in their mouth. And so make it so that when they go pick this thing up, it's awkward and it's a little cumbersome and it's a little bit, it's a weird shape for them. Make it so that when they pick it up wrong, they don't jab themselves or poke themselves with a sharp bone. You know what an antler is. I mean, it's hard. It's pointy. It's you jab yourself with an antler, it hurts. So now do it in your face. Like, that really hurts. So if I can figure out a way to make something look like the antler but doesn't necessarily feel like it and certainly doesn't poke or jab like it, now I can start teaching this dog and get it through some of those rougher times where it's just not very good at it yet, without creating a negative effect, without creating a dog that says, nope, I don't want to do it. So that's where that dummy came around. And from that, I went, well, I know that we have to eventually incorporate the nose, because I do a lot of stuff with tracking dogs now, and I realized I've learned so much more about a dog's nose over the last probably 5 to 7 years, just because of, more so for tracking, but I learned more about the noses from canine trainers like police dogs and drug dogs and bomb dogs than anybody and anything, because with them, like, that's their livelihood. Like, they can't make mistakes on that stuff. So they know a dog's nose processes scent. And so I've just learned so much from them and realized, I knew all along, but it's been really put in front of me now and out right in my face, with the idea of, I got to get these guys using their noses. They use them naturally. That's the nice part. Like, it's not like I don't teach a dog to use his nose. I teach a dog some discrimination. I got to get them to understand what it is that's going to equal that retrieve. So at that point, I went, how am I going to do that? And that took me a while. Like, I fooled around with different processes of trying to replicate and figure out how to get these scenting elements. That's what it really amounts to. Is antler is part of it. Like, I think a lot of people think the antler is the scent. Well, that is part of it. Bone smells, and as bone ages, it changes. So there's just different scenting elements there, but there's also a lot of outside influence of scenting elements that are found on shed antlers too, that I think a lot of people overlook. So when I started thinking about it, I went, there's the antler, but what about all the other stuff that associated scent-wise. And so I my own. I mean, I literally tinkered with it for a while, and started creating it until I thought I was doing the best I could to replicate as many opportunities to simulate stuff that the dog's potentially going to find associated with it, and then be able to connect it to the visual, which then connect it to the retrieve. So it's just linking all these things together. But so that was, so I came up with this thing, and then I figured out how to put scent on top of it, and I went about it very similar to how I would do a gun dog or a bird dog. I mean, the training is not that much different when you start talking about the X's and O's of it, but the tools you got to have the right stuff. But that, those are big moments for me from a development standpoint. Of those are little lights went on moments for me where I went, I think that'll work.
All right, Jeremy. So this is Kevin. I've got a 2-year-old. It's actually her birthday today. Her name is Birdie. She's a 2-year-old golden retriever who loves pheasants and ducks. We're getting her into geese a little bit. She's a little peanut though, so she struggles carrying around some big geese. But I'd love for some off-season mental work for her. My wife and I go hiking a lot, so we're always out in the woods, but I think it'd be great to, not only have Birdie around, which we do anyways, but it'd be good to have some mental work where she's searching for different things. And she loves antlers. She's had, little chew toy antlers since she was a puppy. So when you tell her to go find her antler, she starts looking around the house and goes and brings it back to you.
Sure.
So I don't think it's going to be that much of a stretch to have her quartering while we're out on a walk in the woods. But I guess give me some advice. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, so, well, I think it makes a lot of sense. So, when you start out and you go, you said you duck hunt with her, right?
Yep.
And happy birthday, by the way, Birdie. But so you duck hunt with her and you pheasant hunt with her, right?
Yeah. She gets a good amount of exercise and definitely understands that we're out in the field, in the woods, whatever, and we're looking for X to retrieve.
Yeah. So the reason I point out those two things are because they're very contrasting things. Like a gun dog, if we're going to duck hunt with a gun dog or goose hunt with a gun dog, we need a dog that's steady to shot. We need a dog that's lining. We need, like the stuff, the actual stuff we're doing with that dog in comparison to what we're doing with the pheasant dog. They're pretty different, quartering and casting, flushing and retrieving versus steadiness and all that stuff. So those two things you're able to do, and I think most people that are listening will be able to say, with confidence, they can go, yeah, you can do both with your bird, with your gun, with your dogs, gun dog, bird dog, whatever it is, you can do both of those. What's interesting is a lot of people think when it comes to sheds, that's too, that's way too specialized. And I think they're intimidated by the idea of it and afraid of the fact that, the idea that they could do it. And I gotta say, man, like, you're able to do some two activities that are quite different. The shed hunting part of it is like identical to the pheasant hunting part of it. If you've got a pheasant hunting, if you've got an upland dog, they're going to do about that when they're shed hunting. Like I purposely, like I don't want a dog that a lot of people talk about, like when you talk about specifics of a shed dog, they'll ask, well, how far will they range? How much ground? Because I always say they cover a lot of ground, and they do, but I don't like dogs working out beyond gun range. Like, I don't want a dog that works beyond where I could shoot. And so and it's for a couple of reasons. One of them is because I bird hunt with them as well, and I don't want to start forming habits that I'm going to have to train out later. I don't think it's flipping a switch with a dog and saying you're shed hunting today, tomorrow we're pheasant hunting, so your range is going to be completely different. So I go with the close working dog. I prefer the shed dog that works close. And I have some people go, man, I don't need a dog working out 30 yards. I need them to really get out there. And I challenge people when they say that. Next time you're shed hunting, unless you're out in a field, like unless you're in a hayfield, let's say you're in a hayfield, Stevie Wonder can find sheds in hayfields. Like you don't need dogs to find sheds in those types of situations. Now, what if you're in CRP? Okay, so if you're working in CRP, and that's a field. It's not necessarily the woods, but I'll tell anybody, when you're shed hunting, stop and look around 30-yard radius and tell me, if there was a shed laying within a 30-yard radius of you, would you be able to see it? Like, you're not going to. So the dog that works that 30-yard range is covering a lot of stuff that you're not going to see. And I think if you start extending them out hundreds of yards, which a lot of guys want, not only are they going to get in trouble, they're not going to cover it. They can't cover it all. But you have this disconnect with the dog. Like, I'm big on the idea of when you shed hunt with a dog, you're a team. Like, when I say a team, I mean it's the handler and the dog. It's not as simple as sitting in the back of the truck drinking coffee while they fill the back end with sheds. It doesn't work that way. I think a lot of people want it to work that way. It doesn't. Like, I walk as much or more with a shed dog than I would walk without one. And that's part of the reason why we have more success. Like, if you go duck hunting every day, you're going to shoot more ducks than the guy that goes once a week. Like, because you do it more often, you'll have more success. If you walk a lot of miles shed hunting, you're going to find more sheds. It's just the way it is. So I get a little off track, but so back to the idea of, you've got this, Birdie, the 2-year-old dog. I think what you want to do is you really want to figure out, I would look at it and go, how did I get her to be a good upland dog? And then what I would do is start back at that point, and I'd go, all we're going to do, Birdie, is we're going to change objects. And it's going to look a little different. It's going to feel a little different. And it's going to smell a little different, but the result's the same. Like, you're going to make me really happy when you find this, and you're going to make me even happier when you bring it back to me. And so that would be my real general approach to it. One of the, like, a more specific, you had mentioned that you have antlers, and she it's a she, right?
Yeah.
So she plays with antlers and chews on antlers at your house. Here's where I have concern with that. I'm not against antler chews, unless you want to have an antler dog, like a shed dog. So here's why. I'm a believer in the idea that we're constantly training. Like, everything we do is training. Dogs are always learning, and we're always training. And what I'm fearful of is the idea of training something into them that is not desirable. You're one of two things. You're going to have to train it out eventually, or you're going to be stuck with something that is really, you're just not looking for. And so I'm a believer in simplifying dog training into the idea that dog training is nothing more than forming habits, and habits are formed by repetition and consistency.
Right.
So when you have a antler around the house, I think there's habits that are formed, and none of them are real positive. So here's the scenario. Let's say you have a shed laying, in the house somewhere, or in your yard, or wherever, and throughout the day, the dog might go past it 100 times, and if they pick it up 10 times to play with it or chew on it, that's fine. It's not exactly what we're looking for in a shed dog, but they at least acknowledged it and picked it up. But what did they do the other 90 times?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
They walked right by it. And so what I think happens is we, not intentionally, we are forming habits that are not desirable. The other thing is when they do pick it up, like, my idea of a good shed dog is not a dog that lays down and chews on the antlers in the woods. And so if that's the ritual, if that's the habit, if that's the thing that they do at the house, I think that will form habits, and I think that's essentially training. And so I don't want that. So it's no different than, a pheasant dog. I don't let them take their dummies and lay around the house and chew on them.
I was just going to say that.
Training. Because I think what happens is then we get dogs that are, they're confused because they go, wait a minute, sometimes I can lay around and chew on it. Sometimes you think I got to hold it and deliver it to hand. Like, what's it going to be, one or the other? And I think we have to be consistent. I think dogs like structure, and I think they like consistency. So I like to build it in that, the idea is, if you see or smell an antler, you got one job. pick it up and bring it back to dad. And boy, he's really gonna, you're really gonna, you get double reward. You get the idea of the retrieve, which I think is the most valuable thing. That's why they do it. It's not because they like antlers. I think it's a combination of biddability. They know it makes me happy, so I think they want to please me. But the other part of it is I just think they love to retrieve. And so if you can give them objects that equal retrieve, that's the big reward for them.
Well, I agree with you completely, and I never really correlated it with shed hunting. This is Bob, by the way. So it would, like you said, it'd be the same as allowing a young puppy to have a bumper in the house and chew the bumper up and carry it around, and it devalues the bumper. Versus how I do it is when they see the bumper come out, it means fun time, work time, retrieve time, and if you give it to them only when you're out doing that behavior, that what we're trying to accomplish, it increases the value of that object.
Absolutely.
Cool.
That's exactly it. I mean, in the springtime when the snow melts, my ditches by my road will be full of empty pop bottles. People just throw them away because they're not worth anything. But if there was $100 bill in every one of them, there wouldn't be any in the ditch because everyone would pick them up because they'd have value. And I think for our dogs, we have to figure out how to give them value with an antler. And it's a retrieve. That's the value. That's the reward. The reward is not lay down and chew on it. The reward is bring it back. That's another. I just think they live to retrieve. I think they'll do like I've got a dog right now. Spry is a little dog that I'm training. It's my daughter's dog actually, and she's real nice. She's got her quirks, but we trained her live through Facebook, and it was just kind of a fun little project that we did. And she's never been. I'm gonna hunt the dog, but she's a year and a half old. Almost, she's gonna be 2 in a couple months. So she's not a little pup, but she's still a pup, I guess. But she does not like gunfire. I mean, I've not introduced her to gunfire yet. I haven't done anything negative about gunfire with her. She's never been exposed to anything that I know of in a negative way. I just haven't gotten around to introducing her to gunfire. I'm not ready to hunt her anyway, so I'm not in that big of a rush. Well, she doesn't like it. And a buddy of mine has a sister of hers, and he's the same way. And he's like, gosh, she's almost like she's gun shy, but I just don't think she can be. She's never been around it. But she's just a little skittish. She's a little hesitant. Here's how and I was talking with him about this just last night. Here's where I know I won't have an issue, and I'll be able to get through it with Spry, is because she loves to retrieve so much. Like, she can't stand it. Like, she just loves it so much. The way she flips a switch of focus and drive, and like, she's just an animal. Like, she's as cool as can be, and she's just as relaxed as can be, and she doesn't give a damn about anything until she knows there's gonna be a retrieve involved, and then all of a sudden it's like she turns into this like super athlete. And I know that the way I'll get her past this little bit of hesitation when it comes to gunfire is gonna be because her desire to retrieve is so strong. And so, that to me is like just another example of how much retrieves mean to them. Like, they just mean so much.
Right.
And there's such a, and you know why part of that is, I think, and this is a philosophy thing as far as training too, but it's because I don't give them a whole lot of them. Like, my dogs don't retrieve like crazy. Like, I don't send my dogs on lots of retrieves. My dogs look at a lot of bumpers. They don't pick them all up. Like, because I look for steadiness, and I look for dogs to be understanding that they're not going to break, and every retrieve's not theirs, and all that. So when they do have the opportunity to make a retrieve, it's such a great reward to them. They've worked so hard to get it, and so that's where when it comes to training a shed dog, I think it's simple, because you just key off of their inherent trait of love, their desire, and like true. I say love, and I don't say it like jokingly. Like, it's so they're so passionate about it. So that's how I think you can get them to do whatever you want.
Cool. So with that, like, segue there, if we want to start Birdie off, like, all right, we're going to eliminate all the antlers in the house. We're going to make antlers more of a high drive, supply and demand type of situation. How would Kevin or our listeners take a dog who's never gone out into the woods to find sheds? How would you start a dog from zero to going out in the woods and finding one?
Yeah, lots of little steps, and the first one would probably be, I just want them to understand that this thing is going to equal retrieve. So I'd be using a bumper. I'd use one of those antler dummies, and I would do simple, whatever your typical routines are. I use a lot of trailing memories. I use a lot of memories for retrieves, period. So I would start out with like a really, really simple straight line trailing memory, and I'd use the bumper. I'd use that antler bumper.
So
and
do me a
if there's
favor.
any hesitation, I wouldn't even ask the dog to be steady. I'd just get him excited about it. And, oh my God, this is going to be a lot of fun. And I'd pitch it, and I let them pick it up. As long as they picked it up without hesitation, which most dogs will, and then I'd go right back. Then I'd start slowly getting back to the idea of, okay, I'm going to do it more as a formal. This is going to be like a drill, because my dogs like drills. You got to remember. When I say work, like, I think sometimes people think when I talk about working dogs, and I don't think you guys think this, but I think some other people will probably think this. When I start talking about getting into work and more formal stuff, I think a lot of people think that it has to be very serious, and it has to be like almost this idea of like work, like not in a good sense, like work, like, God damn, I gotta go to work again. Like, no, like, I mean work like, yes, I get to go to work again. And so I think that you have to, like, my work for dogs is fun. It's games. It's letting them figure something out, challenge them a little bit mentally, give them some physical things to. Usually I can't even slow them down physically. Like, they're little machines, but it's giving them setting them up with some situations that they can kind of overcome, get through, and be really, really proud when they come back. I always tell the proud dog, because the butt really wiggles and the tail really goes, and like they get that little look on their face, and they're just smiling at you when they got it in their mouth. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'd get Birdie, and I'd turn this into a drill that is fun, and understand that shaping that white thing up. Like, the dummies themselves are white. Like, it's a couple of reasons. Like, it's color contrast. It's real easy for them to see that. As long as there isn't snow on the ground. If there is snow on the ground, I use a brown. I have brown ones too. We have brown ones and we have white ones. The brown one is something that I use at a point where I'm going to transition the dog to use his nose a little bit more. No different than I would use a feathered bumper or a colored bumper with my gun dog. So the brown dummy I use for that. Now in the wintertime when there's a lot of snow on the ground, that brown one is a real stark contrast. So all of a sudden, the antler really pops. So visually, it's easy for them to see. And then I can switch it, and I can use the brown one in cover, and I can put some more scent on it and start having them use their nose a little bit more. But to start out with you, I would just do some simple drills. Understand that you can pick that thing up, and it's okay. It feels good. Dad likes it. It gives me a really nice retrieve. And what you're doing is you're just conditioning in the same habits that are there already from what you did when you trained her as a gun dog or a pheasant dog.
So, Jeremy, can I butt in real quick and just ask you to explain the trailing memory for people who don't know what that means? So
I like trailing memories because they don't jeopardize steadiness. Like, it doesn't. So if I throw a bumper for a dog and then I send them, I call that they're marking a bird, they're marking an antler, they're marking the object down, and then I'm sending them. And so there's not a lot of time that's built in unless you really wait a long time. So it's throw, retrieve, throw, retrieve, throw, retrieve. What happens, I think, is dogs start to anticipate and become a little bit less patient. And so one of the things that I like with a trailing memory is it just, because of the way it's built, it forces the dog to create some patience. It forces me to be a little more patient. It also moves the dog's feet a little bit, so they're not necessarily sending from a stationary spot. Very rarely do I Well, never do I shed hunt and all of a sudden stop and line a dog from a spot. First off, you're never going to see a deer run through the woods and shed its antlers in front of you. So it's not like it's going to be marked, like a marked retrieve by any means. So you're going to have these dogs that are going to have to move and pick stuff up off of the ground as opposed to seeing them thrown out of your hand. So what I like to do is this lends itself really well to transitioning. There's a lot of people that can throw antlers for dogs and they'll find every one of them and they'll always pick them up. And the problem is when they're laying on the ground, they struggle to get the dogs to understand he didn't throw it, so it counts. I should go pick it up anyway. So this is a transitional drill that helps with that as well. But so trailing memory, all you're gonna do is I like to use straight lines. So if you got like a fence line or you got a sidewalk, or you have, this is early on stuff. So I'm gonna try to help these dogs success, and so I'll find an object. It could be like the tree line that butts up to my yard. It's just a visual thing. It's a line. And so I'll put the dog in heel position and I'll heel the dog out. So I walk out, you go 25, 30 yards, however long you want. And then I just pitch the bumper, the antler dummy. I just throw it not very far, just pitch it. And then I let the dog sit and I just let him look at it. And then I tell him no, heel, and I turn around and I walk back. And this is another advantage, I think, with memory. So now we're building in some time. We're building in some delay. We're covering a line in and a line out, and then we're going to turn around and send the dog back on that line. So to finish it out, you heel the dog back out, you turn back around. Dog, visually, that white antler against the grass or whatever it is going to pop. Like, they're going to see it. So that you're going to see their focus. You're going to give them a little bit of time. Then you're going to line them and send them on their name. So that's just a real simple trailing memory. But the nice part about it is the other thing that I think it can do for you is a lot of times folks have dogs that work out to you can line a dog out and you can send them on a blind, you can send them on any type of retrieve, and they hit like this invisible wall. Like they get out so far and then they hit like a brick wall and they start to work left and right and they're looking for something. And 9 times out of 10, it's frustrating to people, and they'll come to me and they have the dog that does that, and I'll say, well, I can tell you why it's doing that. And well, how do you know? I said, bring your dog back. So bring the dog back, and I'll say, okay, take a bumper out of your bag and throw it as far as you can. So they throw it, and miraculously it lands at that distance. So we can only throw things so far. And what happens is after we do we get in ruts. Like, we totally get in a rut as a trainer. We do the same damn thing over and over and over again. We don't even notice it. Well, what happens is you throw the bumper over and over and over again, and the dog memorizes how many steps it takes to get to that distance. And that's where it is always. So what happens is now all of a sudden, maybe it's another 10, 15, 20 yards out, but the dog mentally just can't physically get through that barrier. They run out to a certain distance and they start to hunt. So when you do a trailing memory, you can pitch a bumper, you can heel a dog out, pitch a bumper, then you can turn around, you can heel, and you can walk as far as you want. And you can send that dog, you can send them 1,000 yards if you want to. You just got to walk 1,000 yards back. And so what's happening is you're able to kind of extend some of these dogs' distances. But so that's just another upside to the drill. But that's how I get dogs to understand, just because something's out there, there's going to be some time I'm going to have to wait. And I think it just challenges them mentally as much as it does physically.
Cool. So from starting that kind of program where you've now taught the dog, a young puppy, to enjoy picking up bumpers, the shed antler, dummy, and I know that you sell and have created this scent.
Yep.
And you kind of have taught this dog, this is the scent we're looking for, this is the shape of what we're looking for. We've done some marks with it. We've done some fun bumpers with it. We've done some memory building with it. How do you go, I know how I would do it, and I would do it kind of like how I teach pheasant hunting, but would you then go to a soccer field with short grass and scatter a few of them out there for the dog to kind of learn how to quarter and work a field efficiently? How do you go to the next step, basically?
I wouldn't, because my fear is here's why I wouldn't, is especially if it's short grass. So if I scatter a few out, my problem is my dogs are super smart, and they're going to visually probably see it.
Gotcha.
And they're going to, I don't want dogs, just because they see something out of range, I don't want them going. Like, I want dogs to figure out how to work close and work within range. And when we get there together, that's when we can, make it happen. So what I would do is I like to work dogs in quartering. I get them in. So what I would do is this is one of the things I do, whether it be a pheasant dog or a shed dog, doesn't matter. But to get quartering and casting, first off, I like to set myself up physically with some boundaries. So like I'll take strips. I'll take strips of grass and I'll mow straight lines. So I might give myself 30, maybe 30 yards wide, and I'll have a mower, or it might be something else. It might be a field where a field changes. In our DVD, we did a shed training DVD, and in the DVD I used a washway in a field. So it was an alfalfa field on the right. It was a cornfield on the left, which was, at the time of the year, it was harvest. It was springtime, so it was corn stubble basically. And then there was this ditch that went through that field, which was like a wash. And so it was a little bit taller grass, and it was just wild grass or whatever. So it was like 30 yards wide, but it was like 500 yards long. So it gave me this really nice like corridor to work my dog down and let them bounce back and forth between the alfalfa and the corn, And I did it in like a quartering way. So I physically walked at like a 45-degree angle, and I started working my way towards the alfalfa. And as soon as my dog, he kind of mirrors me, kind of shadows with me, because I've got this connection. Like, I think the foundation is the key. Like, I can't do this drill if I don't have a dog that works well recalling to whistle. I can't have a dog that doesn't turn to look on a whistle. I can't have a dog that has no range whatsoever, that just kind of free for alls. And so the foundation has to be there first and foremost. So we're assuming that we have that. So I go in like this 45-degree angle, and all of a sudden, as soon as the dog hits that alfalfa field, I'll peep my whistle, beep, beep. And as soon as I peep the whistle, because the dog's been taught to recall the whistle, they turn to look at me. And so they hear this whistle, they turn and they look. And before I peep the whistle, I have to change directions. So I'm going, let's say, envision yourself going down this tunnel, and you're going to a 45-degree angle to the right. And as soon as the dog hits that alfalfa on the right, before it happens, I stopped, turned to the left, and 45-degree angle that way. And the second the dog hit the alfalfa, I went beep, beep, and the dog turned and looked at me. And the second the dog turned and looked at me, they went, oh no, he's going the other way. And so they come with. So they're now all of a sudden they're quartering back to the left. And so I'm going to work that way, and then all of a sudden the dog's going to get close to that corn stubble on the left-hand side. And just before the dog gets there, I turn myself and I go to the right, at 45 back to the right. And as soon as the dog hits the corn stubble, I beep, beep, and the dog turns and looks, and I'm going the other way. And so now all of a sudden I'm getting this dog to start working this pattern with me. And so that's my establishing of a quartering. The reason I don't put things out in front of them is because I'm going to try to work into the wind. Like, I'm going to try to work into the wind, or at least a quarter to the wind. So if my dogs and my dogs' noses are good, they're going to get wind of stuff ahead of time, and all of a sudden, they're gone, and they're going to pick something. And I don't want to correct a dog that's going to pick something up that I want them to pick up. So, but it lends itself to them getting out of range pretty quickly. So what I will do is I'll work, and then I'll pitch behind them. So I might have all the stuff in my bag. I might have all my bumpers in my bag. And as I work and the dog's working to the left, I'm throwing up and to the right when they're not looking. And then I'm going to work back into it. And then I'm going to work. So I don't give them the chance to win stuff way ahead and then go.
That makes a ton of sense.
So it's and I think that's for me, that's a real similar scenario that I would do if I was training an upland dog. To me,
Exactly.
that's I don't want dogs to get birdie on a bird that's way down at the end of the field, because I won't get invited on the next trip. Like that's that guy. So very, very similar. I just do a very similar type of drill, different shape, different smell. That's all.
Cool. So those are two great ideas and ways for people to develop the quarter And then do you take them out, and just basically, one of our earlier podcasts, he's a upland bird guy. His way of describing, developing a bird dog was birds make a bird dog. So
Sure.
getting out there, spending time in the woods, spending time in the field,
Totally.
that creates a real shed dog. Is just
Yep.
get them out there. Do you actually plant? I'd assume you do. Do you actually plant antlers out in a field and know that you're going to go on an hour-long hike with this young dog, and they're going to have to wait some time to find it, but they're out there, and so that they're going to be successful?
I very rarely plant them. And so I totally know what you're saying, and I think it just makes logical sense, and I think people assume to do it, and what I end up seeing is, and this will kind of depend on what your end goal is. So I don't do trials. I don't compete with dogs. I hunt them. Like my ribbon is not a ribbon. My ribbon is an antler if it's a shed dog. So I don't do trial type scenarios, but I think and I totally understand them. Like I get why they do them. I think it's great because I think it grows a lot of awareness for the sport, and it's different. And I think some people have a hard time realizing and understanding that it's different, but I think it's probably because they don't shed hunt either. Like a lot of people do competing in shed stuff, but don't actually shed hunt. And that's not to say everybody, because I know there's a lot of them that are really hardcore shed hunters. But I will say this, you train completely differently. And so the idea of like what you just touched on is huge, is the idea of you could go for hours, like not just an hour. Like I shed hunt as much as I can. I don't as much as I'd like to, but as much as I can. And I go quite a bit. Usually I find quite a few in a year if I do get out, but we put a lot of miles on, and we walk a lot without finding any. And so what do you do in those situations? It's hard to ask a young dog to do that. It's hard to ask a young dog to keep its focus. It's hard to keep a young dog interested in something like that. So I don't, from a training standpoint, I avoid the idea of going out and hiding a bunch of antlers, because that's what everybody does, and everybody does really well with it, and then they're all greatly disappointed on the weekend and when they actually go shed hunting. And the reason I think it is because although their intentions are good, the actual connection from transition from training to the field is missed, and that it creates issues. I don't care how many acres you have, and like 10 acres is not, like 10 acres, we all know 10 acres is not a lot of land, but physically 10 acres is, it's a pretty good chunk of it. When people realize what 10 acres really is, most people plant their antlers in about 2 or 3 acres max, and I think they got it in 10. And so what happens is they put 5-6 antlers in there, and then they put their dog in there, and then their dog flies from antler to antler to antler to antler and picks them all up, and they're done in 3.5 minutes. And they go, oh my God, this dog is on fire. Like, this is the best shed dog ever. In that scenario, it's real good, and that's fine. But it's so unlikely that you're ever going to go into a spot that's 2 acres and find 5-6 sheds. Like, and then what do you do when that's done? Because you got 8 more hours of shed hunting to do. And so the idea of like being able to bridge and connect the focus on these young dogs is real important. And I do it really simply. I just put a little shed in my back pocket. And so as I continue to go and I see it's again, this is the part that I like by working with a dog closely, is being able to read the dog. Like I'm watching the dog constantly. I found one antler many years ago with Finn, that one of my best. I found the antler, and she had a hard time with it too. It was actually a buddy of mine that was looking for this specific deer shed. It was a big shed. He knew the deer shed. He knew it shed within a certain day because of his trail cameras. He knew it was in a certain block of woods. It was 80 acres, which is pretty good size. Figured that antler was in there. So he couldn't find it. He called me and asked me if I'd bring Finn. So I did. So we're going through, It's one of my prouder moments in shed hunting. But we're going through and coming out, man, we can't find it. And we're almost done. Like, we're almost back to the trucks. And it was after several hours. And all of a sudden I look out, I'm walking up this hill, and, you know, I'm relatively close to her, but it was something about her body language changed. The rhythm of her tail changed, the way she arched her back a little bit different. And you could just, she was birdie is what it looked like. And it was just, but it was just faint. And you could just see she was just catching little bits and pieces of scent. And then all of a sudden she really hovered, and she just really was moving her nose left and right, left and right. And I just watched this dog, and it was just unbelievable. But all of a sudden I'm looking, and here that antler was, it was in actually like a tree that had fallen over, and the root ball was like up. So there's this hole. That antler fell down in the bottom of that hole. And so it's down 2-3 feet below grade. And you could tell she was nowhere near the antler. She wasn't that far away, a couple of yards, but she was just working the nose up in the air. And all it was that wind was working that scent. It was swirling. She was just catching little pieces, little pieces, little pieces. So what I ended up doing was, after all that time, by me seeing, like, if I hadn't physically seen her, I'd have just kept on walking, and I may have even called her. And if I had called her, she may have came, because you could tell it was so faint. The little bit of scent that she had was so faint, but because I read it, and she was able, that dog was able to kind of work past the idea of being lulled into this sense of, my God, we've been walking a long time and haven't found anything, to all of a sudden she responded, she reacted. Now, she was a little bit older. She had some experience, but so I think you have to be watching your dog to see that stuff. And then when you see them like checked out, like they're eating more deer poop than anything, and I mean, they're just not interested, then that's when I need to get them back. So I might drop an antler, I might circle back around, and then I might let them find it. And I might watch them. I'm not going to coach them. I'm not going to help them. I think we get it's way too easy for us to see an antler and then like walk the dog over and point its nose at it and be like, oh, you found it. Like, let the dog work. I watched one of my dogs find an antler live on Facebook. We were doing it live, and like, she looked awful. I mean, it was one of her first antlers she ever found, and she tripped on it 3 times. She just didn't pick it up. And so, as frustrating as it was, as much as I wanted to just say, pick the damn thing up and let's go, I just sat there and gritted it out and, come on, you can find it, and you son of a gun, you. I mean, I was mad. But then I went, what am I going to gain right now by walking over and picking the antler up and keep moving? So we just waited and waited and waited. And when she did find it eventually, I treated that little dog like she saved the world. And I think that stuck with her. I think that was a big step for her. It was a big learning thing. So it all comes back to the big patience word. I mean, you got to have patience.
That's huge, man. That's real huge. So I think the things that I want to maybe reiterate that I've learned and that Kevin has learned and what we'll do with Birdie is A, get them on scent. B, get them to make the antler a higher drive, supply and demand style object, and build, like we've done with pheasants, like we've done with ducks, an experience. So you've experienced it in the backyard. You've experienced it in alfalfa fields. You've experienced it in the woods. And teach that dog over time where they're going to find it, what the smell is, how to work a scent cone, and to trust themselves that they're going to, through patience and determination, that dog's going to be successful.
Right. I think you got to look at it as a team. Like, it's you and the dog together, not independent.
Couldn't agree more.
But I think you summarize it really well. Like, that's your approach. And I think one of the hard parts about shed training is you don't have nearly the opportunities that you do with a pheasant dog. Like, with a pheasant dog, it's pretty easy to go to a game. I just picked up 25 roosters yesterday. So like, I just put 25 roosters in my little pen back here, and that's 25 real birds that I'll be able to train with, and dogs will have some really, really nice experience and opportunity. It's not the same as a South Dakota wild bird,
Exactly.
but it's a step. It's incremental, and I'm going to eventually get to that South Dakota wild bird.
Yeah.
The thing about the South Dakota wild bird or the game farm or my backyard with 25 roosters is it's relatively easy for me to simulate very, very closely. Some could say realistically. I mean, in Wisconsin, we don't hardly have any wild birds. So like they're almost all planted. So as it's relatively easy to get a dog in front of lots of opportunities to gain experience when it comes to the birds. When it comes to shed hunting, like I can South Dakota, you could walk a slough and flush your dog can get 500 flushes in the first day between hens and roosters.
Sure.
You're not going to find 500 shed antlers. I won't find 500 shed antlers in multiple seasons.
Right.
So the opportunities are less, which means all the more reason you have to make the most of every one of them. And so, and that's why, it might take a couple seasons. I hate to disappoint people.
No, I think
I want
it's
to be realistic.
No, I think it's back to what we were talking about with clients and teaching them what a dog is. Like, yeah, your dog went through training. Yeah, you've put a lot of time in, but the only thing, it's not going to come out in its first season and be an all-star. Its third and fourth season, it's going to finally put all these pieces of the puzzle together and be a true seasoned,
Totally.
Nothing can shake it, nothing can rattle it. It knows what to do. It knows to be patient. It knows to wait. It knows when gunshots go off. Not every bird falls, especially when Kevin's shooting.
Kevin. I'm with you.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so it takes
Totally.
time to develop a gun dog. It takes time to develop a shed dog. It takes patience, and it takes experience. A question I had written down, I've got two more questions for you. One of the questions I had is for a novice shed hunter. So a guy or a girl who they've trained their dog, right? They've spent 6 months, whatever. They've got a young dog. They're going to take it out and hunt, but they don't really know what to look for cover-wise or habitat-wise that could be successful for them as well as the dog. Is there any advice you can give? Like, all right, if you're going to state land, public land hunting, in your state's different than mine versus Wyoming versus wherever, but what kind of cover are you having a lot of success in that you can point these people in to help them and their dog?
Sure. It's a great question because the best shed dog in the world won't find sheds if they're not there. And that's just reality. And so this is me talking shed hunting now, not necessarily just dogs, but shed hunting in general. This is my personal experience, and I've found enough to get better at it. And I think that's the key is you find one and then you go, how come? And then you figure that part, all these parts and pieces out. But I personally can say this, this is my preference. You gotta have food. Like the depending on so you gotta like break it down scientifically and realize like these deer shed in a relatively short window of time, spring, late winter. And so there's a lot of influences and things that change that, stress and injury and all that stuff. So there could be deer shed in the strangest places, and they do because of things like that. But as a rule, the majority of the deer, I'm a believer in the idea of towards the time of the year when they're going to shed, deer are always in survival mode. Like they have to be. They're hunted hard. They make a pretty tough living, especially in certain areas. So I think that, I'm from the Midwest, but it's completely driven that time of the year when they're shedding. Their life is revolving around food and trying to stay alive. So I'm a believer in the idea of lowest pressure wins, most food wins. And so I believe if you don't pressure deer, meaning like you leave them alone, you don't push them around. I think that in that time of the year, late winter, early spring, if they can help it, they won't go for more than 40 acres away from a food source. And I'm talking like big food sources, not food plots, not kill plots. I'm talking like corn, I'm talking beans, I'm talking alfalfa, I'm talking spots that are like major food sources for these deer at that time of the year. And if they can, they'll try to not go as far. They'll go as little as possible, because it's just a numbers game for them. Like, it's calories. They have to bring in more calories than they burn, and if they burn more than they bring in, they'll die. So they are going to travel the least amount. They're going to travel at certain times of the day when it burns the least amount of calories. So if you leave them alone, I think, and you have a good food source, I think on our farm, the farm that I hunt on, we leave like 19 acres, probably pretty close to 19 acres of beans and corn on the farm left standing. Some years it's even more, but it's 100% for sheds. Like, I mean, we late season hunt over it a little bit, but we leave it because we love to shed hunt. And so what we do is we leave all that food. Well, the farms around us that aren't so crazy about sheds, they harvest. And so what happens is, and we find it every year, deer will come a long distance to live in the woods near our food, and they'll stay there. There's no reason for them to go anywhere else. We've given them everything they need. Now, public, you mentioned, you're going on public ground, big state ground somewhere. I still think you got to find food. I mean, the deer have to be in areas that they're eating. And so, and I don't necessarily always find a lot of sheds in the food. I think deer spend time eating in the food, but then what happens is they get off that field. They're not necessarily safe in that field all the time. So they get off and they get into thick stuff that's relatively close. They lay down and they chew their cud. And so when it's a numbers game. Like, you got to look at a buck's daily activity and you go, that it's an odds thing. It's just a numbers thing of where is he spending the most time? Because you don't know when these things are going to fall off, and I don't think anyone can predict it. It's just, it happens and boom, they're off. And sometimes it happens and one side stays for a while. Like, there's one of the interesting things about antlers in general. But you got to look at it and go, where do they spend the majority of their time? Because there's a higher likelihood of them being there when the antler falls off. Like, that's just the numbers. So I like to start in food, and then I work my way back to bedding areas. And between bedding areas and food, I would say is probably 3/4 of the time or more spent with those deer at that time of the year. So you got 75% better chance of finding it in that area than outside. Now, you always find, that's the thing about shed hunting. Like, you'll find these little pockets, and you'll find 2-3 sheds in there. And sometimes we find multiple years of sheds in the same spots I found 3 years of one buck. All 3 years were within 100 yards of each other. And the one year that I found the match set, I had found the shed from 2 years prior still there. Like, it was chewed up, but it was still there. And so these deer are habitual. Like, they're so interesting. I love them. I just, they do the same things over and over and over. That's why, if they get old, this buck was a 5-6 year old buck that I found these sheds off of. There's a reason he was 5 or 6 years old. He did the same thing every year, and it was the right move.
And he kept dodging your
the
bullet.
Ones that make the wrong moves, they don't get to be 5 or 6.
No doubt about it. All right, my last question is, have you ever had a problem transitioning a seasoned gun dog? Like, I'm thinking, I've got an old dog buck, and he's 8.5, and he's a pheasant machine, duck machine, and I would like to transition him to sheds for the simple being of keep his body moving, but I also, when he's out pheasant hunting, he is, it's like dangerous for his well-being as an older dog with arthritis. Like, he just goes so hard, he can't go as long. But if you just take him for a stroll and he knows you're not hunting, he's more easygoing. And I'd like to get him into shed hunting have you had any issues where you're taking a dog who is looking for birds, right? Like the ultimate, and now I want to transition into a shed. Is there anything I should look for in that training? Is there anything that I can do differently? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I don't even know where to go with it. It's a thought I had that a seasoned gun dog might have a problem transitioning.
I don't think it'll be a problem transitioning. I think you'll have a problem trying if and I'm not saying I don't think think this is what you're saying. I think you could have a problem if your idea would be he's balls to the wall when we go bird hunting, but shed hunting, like maybe he'll just take it kind of cooler. Like I think if he's gonna shed hunt, it's no different than if he's gonna bird hunt. Like
he's gonna be all in.
He should look at it, and that's how you ultimately would look at it as well. I do think that a little bit older dog, a little more mature, if you will. Physically, I don't see downside to it. I go, boy, that time of the year is when I don't do much with my dog, and that might be part of the issue of an all-around general health thing. Like it's like, I don't work out. I should, I don't. And if I worked out and I did it year-round, I'd feel a hell of a lot better. I'd be able to do a lot more stuff, but I don't. And sometimes there are times of the year for me that I really don't work out. Like just physically, I don't do that much stuff. And that alone affects me because I go, man, I'm in the worst damn shape of my life. I got to, so I think there's upside to it just physically by doing something in another time of the year when you wouldn't necessarily be doing something actively with them. But as far as the hunt goes, I think you want the dog to work no different than if he was pheasant hunting. I think you want the dog to work with the idea of this thing, this antler, this shape, this smell. It's just as good as a bird. I've heard several people say, "Oh, they never are. The bird is the bird. The bird is the best. The bird is this. The bird is that." I totally disagree. Like I've seen drug dogs that are way more hyped up, jacked up, excited, like bonkers, because they smell dope, and they look, and you know what? They look just like my dog. They're labs, and so right. I think it has to do with your training and your ability to let the dog understand what it is you want and what it is that warrants the excitement. The idea of their bird, the bird is the biggest thing. Well, you tell that to the guys that started having dogs retrieve nets out of the sea, because I don't buy it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, man. That's a really good point. Well, hey, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time tonight. Sure. I enjoyed talking with you. I enjoyed, hearing your perspective on training methodologies and how we can take our dogs, Birdie and Old Buck, out shed hunting. I mean, I think it's just another thing that all of us as gun dog owners can do with our dog in the off season to be outside, great outdoors, another hobby for us and our dogs to keep them rolling. Tell people where they can find you on social media, your website, where they can find some of your products so that they can start training their dogs.
Awesome. So everything is like our little call sign or name or whatever is DogBone Hunter. So our website is dogbonehunter.com. Our Facebook, our Instagram, we have Snapchat. I don't use it that much. But Facebook and Instagram are real big tools for us. And I guess YouTube. It's all at DogBone Hunter. So I appreciate you guys having me on, man. I really enjoyed it. Would love to do it again if we get around to it. And appreciate you having me, man. I had a blast.
I enjoyed it as Kevin, and I enjoyed it as well. He just nodded at me. So Jeremy, thank you again. We're gonna link this up, and I'm going to blast it all over Instagram and Facebook as well. So.
Awesome.
Dude, thank you so much. Thank you for your insight, knowledge, and we will catch you soon, buddy. Good luck this hunting season.
You bet. Take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of the fall.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you guys so much again for supporting us. this venture, this project, our podcast is something that we are really kind of enjoying and building up a little bit of steam with. We got Wonder Boy back for the summer and into the fall, and we are going to have a lot of episodes in the works for you. So we're going to continue to pump them out. Thank you again for your support. Please remember, if you would leave us a rating, if you would be sure to subscribe, and if you know someone that you think these would help, please let them know about it. Again, thank you so much for your support.